Did I tell you that in React, there's going to be multiple ways how we can write stuff? And I think I did. So why don't we take a look at what would be alternative syntax that you're going to see for the state? And again, there's probably a 10,000 question, which is going to be better. Again, this is going to depend on the situation. So why don't we create that first and then we're going to talk about it. However, before we do that, why don't we utilize the fact that we can do the imports and exports with our application with the six modules? And why don't we transfer all this book data to a separate file? And this is something that we're going to be doing later on, especially as your data grows bigger and bigger. This will going to start getting annoying where we have the state and state has all this information, and then you are rendering somewhere here in the bottom. So it might be much, much more simpler if this data would be in a separate file, and then we're just grabbing the data. So how this is going to work? Well, let's say first and foremost, I will going to swing back, and then somewhere here, we're going to create a new file, and we're going to say new file, book data. We're going to call it like this. So this is going to be JS. Then this is going to be my array. So I can still say books. That is going to be my array. And then within this array, I would like all this information. Now, I don't care about the book right now. Actually, I think I can close it. I don't think it's going to break anything as we're working along. And now let me get all this info. We're going to head over back to the books. We're going to copy and paste it. Maybe in order to make this interesting, first of all, let me close the sidebar as well as let's copy and paste it just so we have more of them. So 1, 2, 3. And you know what? One thing that I always forget to do as I'm setting up these IDs, I usually don't change them. So now let's make a difference. And actually, I will going to be adding proper ones. I will not going to be changing the names. Again, this is just to show you how everything works and doesn't really matter how many we have. But then here at the bottom, I'm going to say export. Export. Now we have the name, obviously, of books. So we can just do the default one or whatever we would like. We can do the, obviously, the name one as well. So let's write books. This is going to be saved right now. And now as we head over back to the book list, we can do the import. We can do import. And then we're going to be looking for books data. Again, since this is a default, I can name this whatever I would like. And we're going to be looking for the book data. So from, then we have /, and we're going to be looking for the book data. And in this case, what I would like to do is set up these books in the state, not equal to already an array, but I'm just going to use this books data. And let's see how this is going to work. So I'm going to say books data. And the moment we save it, you already noticed that I have more of them. So you can clearly see that this is going to be working. And that's one of the neat things, how we can separate the concerns. So data is going to be in one spot. And again, this would be very small data. In general, we're going to be having much more. And then we're just using the state to work with this data. However, since we have the class, this is a class-based component, and with the classes, we have a constructor method. Now, the constructor method is going to be instantiated every time we're going to create a class, every time we're going to render the class. And that way, what we can do is we can actually extend it again or use it with the props. Now, how this is going to work. So we're going to say that there is going to be a constructor. So that's going to be, again, our method. And then here we would need to pass the props. So I'm going to say props like this. And then within the constructor, we need to use, again, super. And that's, again, has to do something with the fact that we need to inherit that from the actual component class. Now, what this is going to allow us to do is set the state here. So we can say this dot state. So in this case, again, the difference would be that we need to use this dot, and then we're looking for the state. Now, in our case, again, we're going to do the same thing, where we're going to be having here the object, and then we're going to pass it here. So I'm going to grab this value. I'm just going to cut it out, and we're going to copy and paste it. There's also one more thing that as we're working with events, there's going to be two ways of binding this. And one way of binding your events is going to be in a constructor. So I'm going to leave this. And you know what? I can just tell you that, again, to answer your question, well, when you should use the constructor and when you should use super, because both of them are being supported. Well, the question is that if you're going to be using the constructor, this will going to allow you to access the props as you're working directly in a state, meaning the props that are being passed down to your class-based component. And this is sometimes very useful, where you can right away work with your state and the props that you're getting. There's going to be cases where we're going to use lifecycle methods for that. So throughout the course, whenever we're going to utilize this, we were going to rewrite this kind of syntax where the set state is going to be set up in our constructor. And we're just going to be, again, following the syntax where we have the props and the super. And by the way, in the ES6, the syntax is exactly the same. Whenever we are extending the class from somebody, or let's say inheriting, then we do need to use this super. And the difference would be, obviously, in this case, we're using this dot set state. And then normally we're just going to use state. And again, there's going to be some benefits to this. And there's going to be some cases where we will going to utilize this. But if you don't use those cases, obviously you can use either or. You can work with the state as well as you can work with the constructor. And last but not least, again, as we're covering the events, this is the situation where, again, we're going to have two types of bindings where we can just bind it with an arrow function, or we're going to have to do it again in the constructor. So that would be a short answer about the alternative syntax that we can have for the state. Everything else is going to work exactly the same. There's going to be no difference.